Hello friends, I am glad to see you again. Today I will tell you about the HOA which invited more than 100 people to my land. I didn't realize my big, unused yard was apparently a public campground until 200 people pitched tents on it and started roasting hot dogs over what looked like a sacrificial bonfire made from my fence posts. I found out because my next-door neighbor, Tiller, who has never once called me unless a meaningful portion of the neighborhood is either on fire, underwater, or feeling like trying a class action, rang at 9:16 a.m. and asked if I planned to keep the Bluegrass Festival running all weekend. He was the one who reminded me that 2 nights earlier, I'd told him I was driving to the city for a 2-week work thing. I had actually left at dawn that morning, and my truck was, at that exact minute, idling in a parking garage 70 miles away. I had no plans for a festival. I have a farm. Farms have chores, fences, and private property rights. They do not have stages, bouncy houses, or a parking attendant in a reflective vest waving hatchbacks into my hayfield. "Wait," I said, speakerphone on, forehead pressed to the cold steering wheel as if that could steady the wrongness of what I was hearing. "On my property? Your front pasture," Tiller said. "And the grove by the creek? Tents. A line of minivans along your fence like it's a drive-in movie. I see a sign that says Nature Day, presented by the Grove Oaks HOA. The woman with the clipboard says you donated your land." I inhaled like a vacuum. "Which woman?" Short, orange jacket, loud voice, introduced herself as Melody. Says she's the president. She also said not to be a downer. "Want me to get you a t-shirt? It has a cartoon tree on it." "Please stay away from them," I said. "I'm calling the sheriff." "Already did," he said. "They're on the way. I'm also calling my insurance because if a grill tips over, my fence is next." I hung up and dialed the county sheriff. I still had the non-emergency number saved from when a windstorm took down a black walnut and temporarily relocated it across the road like a fallen railroad arm. This wasn't a windstorm, though. This was trespass in stereo. The dispatcher's voice was crisp and slow, the exact tempo you want when your brain is speeding. "You gave no permission?" she asked. "None," I said. "I have no trespassing signs at 2 gates and a chain on the east access. I run livestock. I maintain an agricultural tax classification. I don't even let friends park there without texting me first. I'm not in their homeowners association. I'm not in any homeowners association." "Understood. Deputies en route," she said. "Do you want to meet them there or remain where you are?" I looked at my day planner on the passenger seat, at the immovable string of meetings I'd moved mountains to schedule. Then I thought about liability, about 200 strangers stepping in groundhog holes, about my goats panicking and crashing into the woven wire. "I'm turning around," I said, simultaneously changing the truck's direction in my entire week. The drive back felt like a movie where the hero races against a clock, only to realize there was never a clock. There was just a wet fuse that some cheerful person keeps trying to relight. I kept replaying Tiller's words. "They say you donated your land." Donated as in gifted gratis blank check? The only thing I had donated recently was 3 dozen eggs to the church pantry. My land was not a bake sale item. Here's the quick background. I own 12 acres at the ragged northern edge of a subdivision called Grove Oaks, which is a name as accurate as a children's drawing of a dragon, meaning it's so stylized that the truth runs away. When the developer clipped the original farm into neat rectangles and named the streets after birds, they wrapped their new HOA around everything but me. The old farmstead, my piece, lies like a freckle, a different color and texture than the face around it. The line where their covenants end and my freedom starts is not just on paper, it's a fence and a ditch and a posted sign. I keep goats, a few hens, an orchard that looks like a polite handshake with history, and a long rectangle of pasture I cut for hay twice a year. If you imagine my land as a boot, the toe points at their clubhouse. We wave sometimes. We are not part of each other. I hit my gravel drive at 10:05 and stared past the sycamores at a scene that looked like someone had told a scout troop that property lines are theoretical. Tents dotted the pasture in colors that had never once appeared under my sky before. Neon, nylon, celebratory. Cars idled along my split rail, carving ruts I would feel in my steering wheel for months. In my grove, somebody had strung up a banner between 2 black walnuts. Nature Day, presented by Grove Oaks. Below, in smaller letters, I could make out a sentence that made my skin go cold. "Thank you to our generous land host." I parked just off the road and stepped out, heart in a sprint. The first thing that hit me was sound. Children shouting with the particular abandon that assumes the ground is benevolent. A portable speaker coughing out compressed guitar. Adults laughing with the careless tone of people who are on someone else's insurance. The second thing was smell. Charcoal, propane, a whiff of lighter fluid. Then something subtler. Wet grass torn by tires, sap bleeding. "Hey!" someone called, and a teenager in an orange volunteer shirt jogged up. "Do you need help parking? Are you here for the knot tying workshop or... Oh, are you the hayride coordinator? We've been looking for you." I didn't answer. I walked. The teenager trailed me, then peeled off when he realized I had an entirely different gravity around me than the rest of the party. I beelined toward the flapjack table, a folding contraption loaded with paper plates and the kind of disposable forks that break if you look at them hard. A woman with a clipboard and that jacket Tiller described stood behind it like a general. She was short, but she had the aura of height. "Welcome to Nature Day," she chirped. "I'm Melody. If you'd like to make a small donation, This is my land," I said. "You need to stop this now." Her smile didn't drop, it hardened. "And you are?" "I'm the owner," I said, pointing at the posted sign visible from where we stood. "I did not authorize this. You're trespassing. Everyone here is trespassing. Where did you even get the idea you could—" "We sent an email," she said, which is the sort of sentence that tells you everything and nothing. "We reached out last week. We got your out-of-office reply. You didn't say no. That is not how consent works," I said. "You don't take silence from a stranger and turn it into 200 people in a bouncy house on private property." She angled the clipboard like a shield. "Look," she said, "we're all neighbors. We all have small lots. You have a big yard. The community wanted to do something outdoorsy. We couldn't reserve the county park because of a scheduling error, and the meadow behind your house is, well, underutilized. We're keeping it natural. It's a leave no trace. You said you'd be in the city. We figured it was a win-win. You wouldn't be using it, and we get to introduce kids to nature. You cut my chain on the east gate," I said. "And that's not a meadow. That's my hay. And the creek you're using as a splash pad feeds my irrigation. And this is not a win-win. This is a break-break, where I get to break this up and you get to break out your checkbook after you get cited." She blinked at cited. "By who?" "By the deputies who are on their way," I said. "And also possibly the fire marshal, the health department, and the county's code enforcement, depending on how many violations I can count in one glance. Did you get an assembly permit? Did you get a temporary food permit? Did you get permission to run a generator?" "We're just neighbors," she said again, as if repetition could transmute trespass into a bake sale. "Why are you being so hostile? Honestly, this attitude is why people think the old farm owners are impossible." I stared long enough for my temper to cool from boil to simmer. "This old farm owner has an attorney," I said, "and an insurance agent who will be very interested in the words, 'We're just neighbors. Move everyone off my property. Now.'" She crossed her arms, clipboard pressing into her jacket like a breastplate. "I don't have to do that," she said. "We have implied license. It's a social event. Implied license does not cover 200 people erecting tents, starting fires, cutting chains, and charging donations," I said. "I'm not going to argue the law with you. I'm going to ask you one last time to get everyone to pack up before law enforcement does it for you." As if conjured, a deputy cruiser rolled into view, followed by another. Relief ran through me like water in a dry creek after the first thunderclap. I raised my hand. One of the deputies, tall, sunburned, and exuding the calm of someone who has walked into many flavor combinations of nonsense, stepped out. "Morning," he said. "We had a report of trespass on private property. Who is the owner?" "I am," I said. "I can show you the deed on my phone, the plat, the tax record, and my boundary map. None of this was authorized." The deputy nodded. "And who's in charge of the event?" Melody took a step forward, then back, then centered herself as if on a stage. "We're all in charge," she said, which is the sort of sentence that makes an officer's eyes do exactly what his did. Flick briefly to mine, then to the crowd, then back, recalculating. "Ma'am," he said, choosing the path of least chaos, "we need the person who organized this to talk to us." "I coordinated," she said, and lifted the clipboard like a lawyer raises an exhibit. "This is a community gathering. The owner didn't explicitly deny permission. This is a harmless outdoor activity for families. We'll be done by sunset." The deputy's voice stayed gentle, but the edge sharpened. "Ma'am, the owner has stated you are on private property without permission. That makes this trespassing. I need you to direct people to leave immediately." "Do you have that in writing?" she asked, which made the second deputy, shorter, older, tilt his head like a dog hearing a distant whistle. "I have it verbally in front of me," he said, And if we have to, we can put it in writing after we cite you. Let's not do that. While the deputies and Melody performed the world's least graceful dance, I did a slow lap of the immediate area with my phone camera rolling, narrating. My fence? Down in 2 places. A suspiciously crisp section of chain, cut, not broken. Tire ruts in my pasture in a perfect parallel pattern, like tiny trenches. Someone had dragged my hay wagon toward the grove and decided it was a stage. A kid swung from the lowest branch of my young apple tree, sneakers grinding bark, while a woman nearby flipped burgers on a grill set so close to my split rail I could feel the heat in my cheeks. A man had tied a hammock between 2 walnuts that, while mature, do not enjoy being load-bearing. A cluster of toddlers splashed in the creek, supervised by a teenager with a lanyard who looked as concerned as a fern. On a folding table, a stack of paper sign-up sheets asked for email addresses for future events, with a suggested donation of $10 per family. News travels on air when the destination is drama. People started to pack. They did it the way people always pack when they feel both wronged and self-righteous. Slowly, with commentary. We're just trying to give our kids a connection to the earth. The community needs spaces. I guess big land means big selfishness. I kept my mouth shut because the fastest way to lose the high ground is to shout from it. The deputies were fast but thorough. They took Melody aside, got her information, wrote something in a notebook that made her voice get thinner and higher. The older deputy checked the cut chain, took pictures. The younger one asked me if I had any livestock out. I told him the goats were in the back paddock, but they'd been bleeding in a way that meant unfamiliar smell plus worry. By noon, the tents were down, the grills were off, the banner was limp. The meadow looked like a defeated parade route. The only blessing was the weather, mild enough that nobody had made a bonfire, which would have been a phone call to the fire marshal and probably a seizure of something heavy and expensive. "Ma'am," the older deputy said to Melody in the tone of someone who has given a warning and is now moving to the next step, "You're going to receive a citation for criminal trespass. You will also be trespassed from this property. If you return without the owner's permission, you can be arrested. You're also going to need to address the property damage with the owner. I strongly suggest you contact your HOA's legal counsel." Melody looked at me with the stunned expression of a person who thought the script would go differently. "We were doing something nice," she said. She has a big yard they don't value. Isn't that worse than using it for the community?" I felt my eyebrows trying to leap off my face. The deputy didn't blink. "Having a big yard does not negate property rights," he said. "It increases your responsibility to ask permission." People finally cleared out. They left behind straws, a single flip-flop, and the kind of ankle-deep ruts you can feel even when you close your eyes. I stood in the silence that never feels like silence to anybody who understands land. The bugs, the leaves, the murmur of creek water complaining softly about rocks, and let my breath catch up. My phone pinged. A text from a number I didn't recognize. It was a photo of me talking to the deputy. Caption, "Farm owner flips out at Kids Nature Day." Another ping. Another unknown number. "We can't believe you do that. Your land is just sitting there." The hair on my arms rose. Someone had crowdsourced my phone number through a neighborhood group. I took a single, deliberate step into the shade and called my attorney, Hollis. He answers quickly when the problem fits into keywords like trespass, damages, and recorded admissions. I gave him the short version while staring at the cut chain as if my attention could re-weld it. He asked one practical question after another. Did I save copies of the sign-in sheets? Yes. I had taken photos while the deputy spoke to Melody. Did I have evidence of the chain, the ruts, the damage to the fence and hay and orchard? Yes, far too much. Did I have any proof of an internal HOA communication claiming I donated the land? Working on it. Tiller had a screenshot of an event post. "Okay," he said. "Here's our path. We send a preservation letter to the HOA board instructing them to save all communications. We file a police report to attach to your civil claim. We send a demand letter for property damage, trespass, and conversion if applicable. We loop your insurance in. Depending on the HOA's response, we prepare for a civil suit. Keep your documentation tidy. Do not engage on social media. Do not argue with neighbors. Everything goes through me." "And criminal charges?" I asked. "The citation should stand," he said. "The DA makes that call. But the civil side will be where the consequences hit. I'd aim for enough to fix every square foot of damage and then some." I hung up and called my insurance agent, a man named Dax, who sounds like he reads contracts for fun. He asked me to send photos and a copy of the deputy's report number. He said a phrase that made something unclench in my chest. "We'll subrogate." Then he said another one that made me frown. "Your umbrella liability could have been a nightmare if someone had gotten hurt. You did the right thing calling the sheriff immediately." I wasn't done making calls. I left a message with code enforcement about the unpermitted assembly on private land. I pinged the county health department about unlicensed food service. I sent a note to the fire marshal with a photo of a grill stationed a whisper from my fence rails. Not because I wanted to rain every possible agency on the neighborhood, but because what happened wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a decision to treat my property like a free venue. Sometimes the only way to teach a rule is to enforce the consequences. At 2:40, as I was setting a new chain and a meaner lock, a man in a polo shirt the exact shade of compromise walked up the drive. He had the walk of an HOA board member. Shoulders back, chin up, smile set like a default. "Afternoon," he said. "I'm Ronan, vice president of Grove Oaks. Could we talk?" I checked the deputies had left. They had. I glanced at the lock in my hands and decided to hold a conversation while making it clear this conversation wasn't going to end with lemonade. "We can talk here," I said. He stopped 10 feet from the gate, which I appreciated. "I'm sure we got off on the wrong foot today," he said. "We were misled. We believed we had permission. Melody told us she had an arrangement with you. There must have been a miscommunication. We want to make it right." "How did she tell you she had permission?" I asked. "She said you'd be out of town and that you'd given a verbal okay at a block meeting last month," he said, eyes sliding slightly left, which is the direction small lies look when they go for a walk. "She said you didn't want the land to go to waste. We have families with very small lots. People are cooped up. The kids are bouncing off walls." "We've never had a block meeting together," I said. "I didn't give a verbal okay at any block meeting. I don't attend your meetings. I'm not subject to your covenants. I'm not a member." He exhaled in a way that meant now we move to Plan B. "I understand you're upset," he said. "We can offer to reseed the pasture. We can get a crew to repair the fence. We'll pay for a new chain. We'll make a donation to your favorite charity. Could we avoid formal complaints? The publicity would be unfortunate for everyone." "Unfortunate for everyone," I repeated. I thought about the text messages. I thought about the farm owner flips out caption. I thought about Melody calling my pasture underutilized like a spreadsheet cell. I realized I didn't want to settle this on a handshake and a reseeding bag from the garden center. I wanted something that made every person who attended think 3 times before their next implied license plan. "I've already made the complaints," I said. "You'll be hearing from the county and the health department. You'll also be receiving a demand letter from my attorney. Depending on your response, formal litigation will follow. If you want to avoid publicity, your best path is to accept responsibility, cover all damages, and agree to a permanent written notice circulated to every member clarifying I am not subject to your association, that my property is private, and that any future trespass will result in criminal charges." Ronan's smile flickered, then reset. "Let's not be hostile," he said. "We're neighbors." "You are my neighbors when you wave from your sidewalk," I said. "Today you were not neighbors. Today you were a crowd who cut a chain." He opened his mouth, then closed it, the logic finally outpacing the politeness. "We'll be in touch," he said, and left. I spent the late afternoon cataloging damage. I do not love lists, but I love order, and a list can be a corridor back to a sense of control. Ruts. 63 distinct tracks, most shallow, 6 deep enough to hold water if it rained. Fence 2 sections down, 4 posts cracked, 1 rail missing entirely. The hay wagon had a new dent and a long scrape where someone dragged a cooler across it. The young apple had a raw ring where sneakers had rubbed the bark. I wrapped it with a guard and felt a pang for the 10 minutes that might shorten the tree's life by years. The creek bank had footstep scallops that would collapse unless I shored them up. In the grove, I found a pile of charcoal ash dumped onto leaf litter, a smudge of black in tinder. I watered it until it cooled and turned gray. The goats watched me from their paddock with the rapt attention of critters who know when the herd leader, me, is rattled. Bruiser, my wether with the heart of a Labrador, leaned on the gate until it creaked and then gave me the kind of side-eye that says, "I would have chased them." I laughed in spite of everything and rubbed his horns. At 5:12, the first email arrived from Hollis. Preservation letter sent. Demand, $18,400 preliminary, subject to refinement. Categories included fence replacement, pasture remediation including soil aeration and reseeding, hay wagon repair, arborist consultation for the apple, bank stabilization, labor, legal fees, and a line item that made me smile despite the day: miscellaneous dignity restoration. It's not something a court would award, but it's a placeholder for the way landowners measure harm in more than dollars. At 6:03, the HOA posted in their internal group that Nature Day had encountered an unexpected complication. Someone screenshotted it to me. Comments bloomed like algae. A small percentage said what you'd hope: we needed permission. We can do this at the county park next time. I'm mortified we assumed. A larger percentage said things like, if you have land you don't use, you should share. Why is he being so difficult? This is a stewardship issue. I didn't reply. I sent everything to Hollis and went outside to sit on the tailgate and watch the sky turn the color of old denim. On Monday, the county's code enforcement officer, a woman named Laurie whose patience had a blade in it, called. She asked me to confirm the date and time, the estimated number of attendees, the presence of grills, amplified sound, tents, and any structures. I confirmed and added the photos. She said she would be issuing a notice of violation to the HOA for hosting an unpermitted assembly on private land, and that she had already sent a warning to their board about future events. By Wednesday, the health department sent me an email that managed to be both dry and quietly furious. It detailed the requirements for temporary food service, noted that multiple grills and a pancake station had been set up on land without permission or a permit, and said they would be issuing citations. The fire marshal followed with a note about open flame near a wooden fence and the absence of fire suppression equipment. I forwarded everything to Dax at my insurance company. He replied with the sentence, "We are opening a subrogation file," and 2 hours later, he called to take a recorded statement, which was really just me reading my list at a calm pace while birds chirped in the background like a nature documentary voiceover. This is the point where, if stories were fair, the board would have knocked on my gate with an apology, a cashier's check, and a few dozen volunteers to push a soil aerator across every square foot. Instead, on Friday, a letter arrived. It was on HOA letterhead, the font businesslike, the tone syrupy. It said they regretted the misunderstanding. It said they intended to make a goodwill gesture of $1,000 for minor disruption. It also said they hoped we could all move forward as good neighbors. At the bottom was a signature: Melody. I took a photo of the letter and sent it to Hollis, who called within 5 minutes. "Do they think this is a lemonade stand?" he said. "Okay, we escalate. Whatever you think is necessary," I said. I tried to be reasonable at the fence. They cut a chain. "Then let's cut through theirs," he said, and drafted a complaint that read like a surgical report. Trespass, property damage, unjust enrichment. They had collected donations for an event held on my land. Nuisance. He included a request for an injunction prohibiting the HOA from entering my land for any reason without my written permission, enforceable with a hefty penalty. He also attached the county violations and the health department citations like ornaments on a tree. "We'll file Monday," he said. "Expect them to get loud. Do not engage." They got loud. Not on public pages, they were careful now. But screenshots have a way of flying. He could have just said yes. This is why people hate landowners. He's weaponizing the legal system. I mowed my fence line and listened to the goats chew and let the sound of the mower eat their sentences. Saturday morning, I found something in my mailbox that moved the entire situation from annoying to surreal. A glossy newsletter, hand-delivered, with a section called Community Spirit. It recapped Nature Day without mentioning where it was held, listed lessons learned, and then, in a paragraph so absurd I had to reread it, suggested that the HOA explore the concept of adverse possession for underutilized adjacent land to secure long-term access for community events. They had included in parentheses, "We're not lawyers," which is the funniest part of any sentence about adverse possession. I walked that pamphlet straight to Tiller's porch and showed it to him. He's the kind of neighbor who can build a chicken tractor from old pallets while giving you a lecture on case law. They think mowing your pasture once a year and letting strangers camp there could rip the deed out of your hand, he said. I've heard of wishful thinking, but this is the wishful thinking where you skip every step of a recipe and hope the cake still rises. Can you imagine the meeting where someone said that out loud and other people nodded? I said. People have a talent for nodding at ideas that let them do what they already wanted to do, he said. What's your plan? Lawsuit is filing Monday, I said. Also, I'm putting up a fence inside my fence. Double fence, he said, approving. A line that looks so obvious a pigeon would notice. And a camera at the gate, I said. And a sign that says in plain language exactly what happens if you cross. You will be prosecuted. And a letter to every household hand-delivered by a process server, not a neighbor's teenager. We spent the afternoon setting posts. There's something satisfying about the thunk of a post driver hitting a T-bar, the kind of satisfaction that speaks a language older than newsletters. By sundown, a new line of green steel ran behind my split rail like a stern parent. On Monday, as promised, Hollis filed. The summons went out to the HOA and to Melody personally, because she had been the organizer who cut the chain and solicited donations. Tuesday, I watched from my drive as a process server, who looked like a kindergarten teacher until you saw the way she stood, all balance, walked up to the HOA clubhouse with envelopes. People gathered. Their voices turned brittle. Melody refused to take hers. The process server set it at her feet and said with a cheerfulness that had a steel rod through it, "You've been served." Here is where the second plot line unfolded, a plot line I didn't see coming. It turned out one of the HOA board members, a man named Abel, had long been at odds with Melody. He'd been pushing for actual transparency, budgets posted in detail, decisions made with member votes, adherence to statutes. He reached out to me privately with an apology and a request. Could we talk? I didn't trust easily at that moment, but we met, standing on either side of the new fence like diplomats. I tried to stop it, he said. I told them if it wasn't our land, we needed permission. I was told to stop being dramatic. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I'm tired, he said. Because I want to live on a street where people don't think the law is elastic if they smile enough. Because our insurance rates already went up last year after a pool incident, and I cannot watch a group of people turn a neighborhood into a toddler with a credit card. We talked for an hour, the way strangers sometimes talk when the topic is bigger than both of you. He told me about budget line items that turned into fog. I told him about hay prices. He said he'd testify if needed. I said I might take him up on that. He said he'd also be running for president at the next election. I told him he had my vote if I were a member, which I am not. And we both laughed in a way that shook off some of the week's static. The third plot line arrived courtesy of a drone. On Thursday, a little whine buzzed the grove, and a white quadcopter hovered over the creek like a nosy dragonfly. I waved it away. It hovered anyway. I jogged under it, and it skittered backwards like a crab. I pulled out my phone and began filming. The drone dipped, rose, then zipped back toward the subdivision. 10 minutes later, I had a knock on my gate. Ronan again, this time holding a controller. "Can we help you?" I said, because I was quickly developing a fondness for plural pronouns when dealing with singular patients. "I was surveying the creek," he said. "We wanted to make sure there wasn't any damage." "You do not get to fly a drone over my property to survey anything," I said. "State law recognizes my right to quiet enjoyment. That includes the airspace directly above my land. Consider this your notice. Fly that drone here again without permission, and I file another complaint and seek an injunction." His smile had gotten thinner over the week, like a piece of gum you keep chewing even though the flavor is gone. "This is getting adversarial," he said. "It got adversarial when you cut a chain," I said, part of me amused at the perfect circle we kept walking. By Monday, my field wore straight truck tracks from the ag crew I hired to aerate and reseed. The bill made my eyes sting. I sent it to Hollis and Dax. Dax dubbed it Exhibit A. Hollis filed for a preliminary injunction. A hearing landed the next week. Court smelled like leather and disinfectant. Melody sat with a lawyer newly aware his sword was foam. The HOA had separate counsel. Hollis set the facts like stones. Deed, signs, cut chain, crowd, no permits, damage, county and health citations, texts, and the newsletter flirting with adverse possession that made the judge's eyebrows try to leave. The judge leaned in. "Community spirit ends where the deed begins. You don't hold a gathering on private land because your lots are small. Injunction granted." The HOA and any officer were barred from my land without my written permission. Penalties attached. They had to notify all members and publish a correction retracting any hint of implied permission or donation. Civilly, we'd only started. The HOA wanted time for its insurer. Melody's counsel tried to split her off as outside the scope. Hollis smiled. "So she's personally liable?" He scheduled the treasurer's deposition. Money arrived as Plot 4. Denny, the treasurer, admitted collecting $2,860 in donations, deposited into the HOA account, and not refunded after deputies shut things down. Donors told it was private land without permission? No. Paperwork authorizing fundraising? She offered a clip art newsletter. We filed for unjust enrichment and asked for refunds or a donation to a land trust. The court favored the latter. The HOA refunded donors and matched it to the trust. Abel ran for HOA president and won by 11 votes. Soon, a neon notice went everywhere. Our neighbor's farm is private property. We do not manage it. We do not enter it without permission. Melody fared worse. Beyond the trespass citation, she faced personal liability for the chain, fence, and my fees tied to her acts. We set a number that stung without ruining. She signed a plain apology. I organized an event on land I did not have permission to use. I cut a chain. I was wrong. I am sorry. Then the land trust asked me to host a real, permitted, small nature day. Waivers, cap of 30, my supervision. I said yes. Abel invited families who apologized or stayed out of the mess. That felt like reclaiming community. I set a second fence line, hung a keyed gate, aimed low cameras, wrapped the healing apple, and laid coir logs with sedges. The goats hated the aerator until Sweet Feed changed their minds. Consequences kept knocking. Melody pled to misdemeanor trespass. No jail, 40 hours of service, restitution, a formal apology, and a year-long ban on organizing permitted events. The HOA's insurer spiked the premium, producing a special assessment, and I finally slept through the night. The drone reappeared once. I filmed it and called the sheriff. A deputy found a county hook. Launching from HOA grounds into my low airspace without permission was a nuisance. The HOA grounded it over me, in writing. Administrative hits followed, assembly and food fines, a fire warning. Discovery poured HOA emails into a folder. Melody had written, OP is out of town. He doesn't care about that field. Another list read, zip ties, plates, pancake mix, bolt cutters, borrow. Hollis labeled them exhibits. I labeled them proof that courtesy isn't a loophole. I quit the forum and read statutes. One word became a talisman, voluntary. Nothing about that day was. Everything since would be. The HOA adopted a property boundary respect policy, boldface written permission, permits and insurance naming the landowner, no bolt cutters except emergencies, a new resident session called Where Your Dues Stop, and a drone line. Abel asked for edits. I added, permission denied is not an invitation to ask someone else. Winter delivered a letter. A special meeting removed Melody for gross misconduct. I straightened the mailbox. Spring's sanctioned class was small, ropes on proper branches, bugs in trays, sedges planted, cups in bags. Permission sounded out by tiny fingers. Later, the civil settlement closed. Full remediation, my fees, policy adoption, injunction copies mailed, a privacy screen installed, and a stipend to the land trust. Melody agreed to pay part of my fees and finish property rights training before serving on any board again. Ronan moved away. Abel ran a boring board, highest praise. Grumbles remained. I waved anyway. Grass grew right. The creek stitched a green seam. The apple pushed stubborn leaves, and Bruiser bumped the gate once, then respected it. Friends, thank you. See you soon.